She now lives happily with her detective husband in the scenic seaside town of Newport, Long Island. When Erin answers the door to Danny's police colleagues one morning, it's the start of an ordinary day. But behind her, Danny walks to the window of their 4th-floor apartment and jumps to his death. 18 months later, Erin is in court, charged with her husband's murder. Over that year and a half, Erin has learned things about Danny she could never have imagined. She thought he was perfect. She thought their life was perfect. But it was all built on the perfect lie. always have a mother to look after them. One day, Lena manages to flee, but the nightmare continues. It seems her tormentor wants to get back what belongs to him, and then there is the question of whether she really is the woman called Lena who disappeared without a trace over 13 years ago. The police and Lena's family are all desperately trying to piece together a puzzle that doesn't quite seem to fit. This book had an interesting start. I think the concept of someone who's been kidnapped, being found, and then not being sure if it's the right person is one that I've seen done before. I've definitely read a book or watched something with the same storyline, but I think this one is done quite well. In terms of the structure of the book, throughout the chapters there are cliffhangers, which instead of leaving them all till the end of the book to like tie everything up, it will leave a chapter on a cliffhanger, and then it will answer it almost like straight away in the next chapter, which I actually really enjoyed. I think it's quite unusual for a book to be written in that way, and I found that quite refreshing and quite satisfying actually. I didn't feel very much empathy for the main character. I didn't really I feel like there's a theme here already. I didn't really empathise with any of the characters very much. Also, I don't want to spoil anything obviously, but there were parts of the book which maybe I just didn't understand, but I didn't think they added up. Like, I don't think parts of it were actually explained, and I was confused by that. Now there's a bit that I've written here that I can't really remember what I meant, but I've written that I love the premise of things not being what they seemed, and about like relocating trauma, but when this is transferred from one person to another, it doesn't really work. Now, I feel like that sentence actually just doesn't make any sense, but also I just don't remember what I was actually talking about. I think there's a bit in the book that's a clever concept of how things don't really make sense, and then how it's explained through the trauma of the struggled with the story as a whole because I felt like in this book there actually were 3 separate stories that didn't really get enough time each to be fleshed out properly, so they came across as a bit surface level and generalised and unbelievable. And it's not that I didn't like the stories, because I thought all 3 individually were interesting, but when you don't get quite enough time to invest in each one, they all just become sort of, just a bit surface level, and I wanted time to delve deeper and to like let each individual one breathe and see what became of it, and I felt like they were all crowded. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine in books when characters make choices that I don't mind, like not understanding why a character makes a choice if it needs to be sort of like justified through their character and their past, and like I don't mind that, but it's when a character makes a choice that is just completely stupid and unbelievable, and you're just like, I'm not sure. I guess people do make choices like that in life, so I can't say that it's not realistic, because it probably is, but I think it's just a bit frustrating as a reader when there are 2 choices and it's so obvious to go for one and they go for the other one, and you're just like, why? Sometimes I think it feels like the choice has been made purely to serve the story, as opposed to being justified through the character deciding to make that choice on their own, if you get what I mean. So yeah, they were my thoughts on Blood Orange. I've given this one a 5 out of 10. Now, it does start to pick up from here, guys, don't worry. It wasn't an entire month of below 5 rated books. The next book is A Kind of Spark by Ellie McNicol. Now, this was recommended to me by one of you in my comments, and I meant to go on and look at how it was before filming this, but I forgot, so I'm sorry. But if this was you that recommended me this book, thank you so much. Addie knows exactly who she is. Addie knows that sharks are more interesting than dolphins. She knows her favourite words in the thesaurus, and she knows that her older sisters are opposites. When Addie learns about the witch trials that happened in her hometown, she knows there is more to the story of these witches, just like there is more to her. As Addie tries to get her small town to make a memorial for the witches, can she challenge the way that they see her? A Kind of Spark is a story about courage, friendship, and what it means to be different. This was recommended on the month where I read A Curious Instant, and it was recommended to me particularly because I was saying that Curious Instant wasn't written by a neurodivergent author, and this one is, so that's why I wanted to read it. And this book was very endearing. I absolutely loved Addie's character so much. And in the book, there are two autistic characters, Addie and her sister. And this was an absolutely genius addition to the book, because when they're talking to each other and you hear how they explain things to each other, it really watched the series, I obviously found this easy to sort of just understand what was happening, but I would be interested to see if I hadn't have watched the series what I would have thought, because I think I might have found it initially quite difficult to jump in and realise what was going on. It moves very fast. There is a lot happening very quickly, and I think lots of books that I tend to read sort of assume that the audience is stupid and explains everything for you and does all of the work, whereas I feel like this book almost assumes that you're smart enough to work it out, and it doesn't over-explain or wait for you to catch up to the story. It just sort of keeps ploughing on and knows that you'll get there in the end, which I think was really refreshing. Actually, it challenged me in a way that a lot of the books that I read don't, and I really liked that, to be honest. So an example of what I mean by that is, like, it might jump time periods, and instead of like telling you at the top of the chapter what time period, or like telling you that it's moved on, it just carries on and you learn it through little things that the characters are saying that you have to pick up on. So it's not that it leaves you completely in the dark, it just doesn't spell things out to you. You have to just kind of work it out, which, yeah, I did enjoy. I don't want to ruin things, but the ending was sad. Not because the writing was bad and it was a bad ending, but I just found it sad, and it's probably because the book is a series, so it will go on to further explore things in the second and third book. In terms of the end, I need to be careful about how I word this because I don't want to ruin anything. I love messy stories. I love things that sort of, I feel like the only word I can use to describe it is messy, because I don't want to tell you if it's good or if it's bad. But I think everything just tied up very neatly, and I would have preferred a few pressure in my mind. So I have written that there's a good start and the writing style flows really well. I really like Angie Amara's writing. When the way someone writes just really like sits well in your brain. I really liked it. I was gripped by the story. There were good twists and turns and good characters. It all ties up really well at the end. There are no plot holes. It's a good, solid mystery book. It's got 2 timelines that are going on that flow really well. You've got the present and then you've got the 80s where the little girl went missing, and they tie together sort of seamlessly. The thing I thought was great about this book was that it's difficult to get the balance of how much information to give, and I think this book sort of nails it because it gives you just enough information to create actually relevant theories. Like, it doesn't send you down a complete red herring. The information is sort of relevant and you can kind of come up with ideas about what you thought happened without actually guessing it. And I think that balance is really difficult, and I think a lot of the time books don't give enough, so that when the twist comes you're like,